Good afternoon, everyone who is joining us today in fall in Vermont, and welcome to UVM. My name is Annie Stevens. I'm the Vice Provost for Student Affairs here at UVM, and I'm joined by...
Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Russell. I'm the Assistant Dean of Students here at UVM. Welcome. Glad that you're joining us.
Yeah. So today's webinar, we're going to cover really, I'm going to talk about what the last 6 weeks have been like on campus, some of the things that students might be experiencing, maybe struggling with, and then Joe is going to really take it from there and cover kind of the next 6 weeks. And in all of that, we're hoping to offer resources on campus, maybe helpful tips of what kind of conversations to have with your students at this point. And anything else that you have questions about, and we will be able to answer those on the chat live. Okay, so let's get started. I really want to go over first before we jump right in is the fact that there are certain skill sets that really make students successful. And for those of you who joined me at orientation this past June, those skill sets both are academic skill sets, seeking out resources in the academic areas like advising, like tutoring, like the writing center, social skill sets, being able to interact, engage, kind of get out of their own shell, if you will, and meet new people, join clubs and organizations, and just really get involved in the life of the campus. And then, of course, there's that sense of maturity that we are hoping to develop and help develop while they're here, but also hoping that they're coming in with a sense of maturity about making really good decisions, especially for their own health and well-being. So we can talk a little bit more about that. So let's jump right into where we've been. Where are we now since we've covered the last 6 weeks? Really, it's been about, I think, making friends, right? It's really about here I am in this new community. What do I need to know? Who are my folks that I'm going to kind of hang out with? They're also learning campus. They're figuring out the roommate issues. Certainly, of course, starting classes, trying to get the sense of what is the class really like. Living away from home. How's that relationship going now that you all may be farther away, certainly, and how much are you communicating with your students? Are they looking at different resources on campus? Are they able to not just be in touch with you, but can they really reach out and find the different resources that are available? And then, of course, as I mentioned before, the clubs and organizations, which are really important because that is the way that they will kind of find their niche, become more engaged in campus, and really what we want them to do. So what helps? Let's think about what helps. Certainly, in the survey we just put up there, you can see that talking to you is really kind of one of the first things that they go to. So this is one of the reasons we do this webinar, is because we know that you're still, even though you're far away, a really important partner in helping your student understand what is available at UVM and what the normal, very normal ups and downs might be, right? I mean, this first year is all about transition. It's all about kind of that up and down roller coaster and normalizing that to some degree, that everybody will have a bump or bumps in the road and highs and lows, and knowing that's okay, I think is going to be really important. So that's some of probably the advice that you can give. That next thing about what helps is certainly joining the club and starting an internship or a work study position, like literally anything that kind of gives them a schedule, gives them a routine, gives them a place that they know they have to show up besides classes, and it helps them meet people. And then some of them right now at this point in time in our semester might be reassessing kind of, oh my gosh, did I take on too much at once? Did I join too many clubs? Am I in too many classes? Am I doing too much? And kind of maybe I'm a little started out of the gates a little too quickly, and need to kind of pull it back a little bit. And that's okay. Like that again is about the first year and knowing and finding your rhythm and finding what kind of load, both involvement wise as well as academically, you really need to take. And some are probably even rethinking their major or rethinking, wow, is this the school or college I really wanted to enter into, and how might I change some academic interests? And then others might need additional support, and that can show up like going to counseling or just a drop-in session or meeting with advisors more, or certainly stopping by faculty office hours. All of those things are things that we really highly encourage. So the next kind of set of slides we have for you are really what we call the 3 typical hot topics for students. And those 3 run in the categories of residential life. That can often be a huge piece of the experience. Even though we just did our what we call a first 6-week survey, and we're seeing really good results in terms of students feeling satisfied and feeling happy with their residential experience. So, you know, close to 95% on both of those questions. It doesn't mean, though, that there aren't students out there that are struggling still, and still struggling maybe with a roommate and issues like that. So we're going to cover residential life a little bit. Student health, that's one of our primary concerns always. We know that if students are not feeling good, either physically or mentally or emotionally, that's then really a hard place to be at and really feel like you're going to be successful in your academics or wanting to get out and about and engage in other ways. And then the last one, of course, we don't want to forget about the academics and how are they doing academically at this point in time. So those are our 3 hot topics. Let me just start with res life a little bit, and you know, the roommate situation. So that can be tough. You know, the roommate is not their best friend.
David Nestor,
their best friend,
but they now joining
get along with them, at least in terms of being respectful to each other. And sometimes, you know, there's issues that come up, like, you know, hygiene, borrowing things. What are the guests allowed to come over? You know, who's supposed to be in the room when? And those are all hard questions and hard conversations, I think, sometimes for someone who's 18, 19 years old. But it's a good time to kind of walk through them. There's residential life staff offer roommate agreements, and it's that point in time where they literally can go through some expectation setting with each other. If they haven't done that already, I highly encourage them to seek out their RA for that roommate agreement. I think that really is more of a structured way to help them have those difficult conversations. And the RAs and the hall staff are there to also facilitate that if the student doesn't want to do it themselves. The hall staff, just as a reminder, the RAs are certainly students themselves, but there's other hall staff that are full-time. There's both residential staff like assistant residence hall directors and assistant directors and RDs. And there's also staff in their learning communities, so program coordinators, program directors. There's just a lot of staff in and around the residence halls that are right there, right in the building. They do this work because they want to see students, they want to interact, and so I think those are really excellent resources for students for any issues that are coming up in the residence halls. And then the housing process, you know, it's unbelievable that we're already talking about that, but the contracts are going to be open soon for thinking about housing next year. So when they come back from winter break in January, they'll start looking at another housing contract that'll offer, you know, options around what learning community do you want to be in next year, and what does that look like. So that'll happen between January 4th and January 22nd. So just have that in your mind for kind of one of those good questions to ask them about, you know, you started to think about next year already. And in January, remember, that's going to be one of your first to-do items in January when they get back from break, to be sure they check in about their housing contract. And then the break, you know, that's right around the corner, the breaks, it's going fast for us here at UVM, but Thanksgiving break comes up at Friday or Saturday, the November 22nd and 23rd, and then ends, it goes a full week at UVM because we want to respect the fact that many students can live far away. So we give them a full week off in November, and then winter break, they come back. And what's hard often too about November break is they come right back into finals. So you could have a student coming home for Thanksgiving break who is fairly stressed and wants to relax, and yet knows that finals are looming right around the corner for them. So winter break then happens December 13th through January 13th. You have them for a whole month. That is a good time to kind of reconnect, figure out what's happening for them, and have those good conversations. And so we'll move on to students.
He is now joining.
There's all kinds of resources for students' health on campus. You know, physical health, we're right in the middle of flu shots right now. We encourage all of our students to get flu shots to keep down any illnesses that may occur on campus because they're living in such close proximity to each other. We've had a couple of questions just about urgent care, and this is a good reminder too to make sure people know that both our student health services as well as our counseling center have on-call 24-hour counseling and services. At least they can direct you to services in the area. And certainly if they're not getting through on call, then there's always the ER that is right here on campus. And then there's several urgent care centers around the campus as well. And they could take a cab and Uber to any one of those if they don't feel like they're getting the help they need on campus at the time that they need it. For mental health, you know, we've got a great portal called You at UVM. It walks students through all the different resources available to them for their health, especially in college. We've got drop-in sessions for counseling, just for kind of like they're stressed or they're not sure what's going on around their health. We have drop-ins that happen both in Living Well in the Davis Center, as well as in different centers like the Mosaic Center for Students of Color, the Women's Center, or the Prism Center. So they should feel free to walk into any one of those places and know that they can drop in and have drop-in hours. And then last, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about, you know, substance use. That is always our you know, piece and challenge on any college campus that is now substances are getting in the way. That's not helpful, you know, so anything around alcohol or cannabis or tobacco even, those things can really get in the way. And I would imagine you're also reading what I'm reading in the New York Times and other places around vaping and how there's
unknown participant is now joining.
We're certainly concerned about. We're trying to get the word out to students about that and those issues, and helping them understand that engaging in and using any kind of alcohol or cannabis or tobacco in any form really can be dangerous to their health. So while we're very proud of the effort that we have made, especially reducing high-risk drinking on our campus, we know that cannabis and tobacco, vaping, all of those issues can come up for a student and kind of really be a challenge for them in many ways. And yet I would recommend Living Well is a wonderful place for students to stop in about anything in terms of their health, because they have all the different programs among alcohol, cannabis prevention, and reduction in use, and along the lines of sexual education, all kinds of good things that are really maybe coming up for students at this point. And then the third hot topic we'll get to is academics. So advising, I think, can be key. You know, one of the things I'm hoping and that you can encourage them to do is that they are meeting with at least an advisor by now at this point in time of the semester, that they are reaching out to faculty in faculty office hours. Those are all good things that they should be doing. If they're not feeling like they're getting the services or the support they need academically, in those areas between faculty directly or their advisor, I highly recommend that they stop into their academic dean's office for whatever school or college that they are connected to. Every academic dean's office has a student services area that kind of oversees all the advising, helps with students day to day about what might be happening and get them back on track. And then there's, of course, academic resources like the Writing Center or tutoring that are offered in the library, as well as Living and Learning Center. They also do study skills in the Living Learning Center. These are just really great resources. Even if a student is doing well, these are great resources to get to understand and kind of find the rhythm of reaching out to those resources when they need them now, or they might need them in the future. And then the academic calendar we went through a little bit, but one of the things I want to highlight now is that the last day to withdraw from a class is October 28th. So if there are students who feel like, wow, this is just not a class that's working out for me, I really do need to, you know, withdraw so it doesn't hurt my GPA, October 28th would be the deadline to do that. And you'd want to see your academic dean's office in order to make that make that decision and have some help doing that. So that's kind of the hot topics. I think I'll turn it over to Joe, and he'll walk through kind of what to expect coming up in the next 6 weeks. And of course, we'll take questions as they come in, and any questions that you have afterward. Joe, you want to kick it off from here?
Thanks, Annie. Again, and it's maybe helpful to note at some point that we might be a little bit farther along in this semester than 6 weeks right now. I think this might actually be week 7 heading into week 8. But yeah, it's true. Helpful to, what has happened to my PowerPoint? Oh, helpful to know as we head in to the next 6 weeks. Absolutely, there are going to be some things that we hope will be on your minds. Hope that they'll also be on the minds of our students. You can partner with us in helping reinforce some of these things. Many of your students will be experiencing kind of right now all the way up to Thanksgiving, kind of what we broadly call midterms. It's kind of, midterms don't really exist like they used to exist, a big midterm exam, but big projects, big exams are absolutely on their minds right now. Your students are, if they haven't been communicating that to you, you can ask questions around how are those going? How are midterms? What do you have coming up? And hopefully they should be able to answer fairly directly the projects and exams and things that they have in each class. Also, simultaneously, though we're not at the end of this semester, they're going to start to get into, in the month of November, having conversations about what courses are they going to choose for next semester. Again, as Annie mentioned, conversations and connections with their advisors here are very important. And if your student is having a hard time figuring out what comes next, now is the time to go and meet preemptively and proactively with their advisor or with someone in the student services office in their dean's office. So please encourage your students to think about that. Also, again, this is the time of semester when we find students starting to whittle down their list of the primary things that they really want to spend time doing. Many students would have joined a whole bunch of clubs. Well, I'll name every student has joined the outing club. And now is a good example of starting to understand what does that mean? And is that the kind of organization and club that I want to be a part of? Or am I looking for different or other opportunities in addition to that? So if you've not had a conversation with your student about that, this is also a time that as they head into November to wrap up this semester, they start to really hone in on these are the things that really are worth me spending time on and the areas that I'm really making good connections with other folks on. And if they haven't mentioned it as well, believe me, on their minds will be going home for break. Break is one of those times that students really have a small little pressure release valve from the stress of school, and many students will be looking forward to coming home soon. For those, I grew up in Jamaica before coming to the United States, and certainly before I ended up here in Vermont. And so again, for the families who may be from far away, winter is coming. Your students can start to feel it. We feel the chill in the air here up in Vermont. The leaves are turning and or falling off of trees. And so before you know it, again, one thing that we'll often mention, again, I'm going to reinforce flu shots as a primary thing that they can be doing, but also just making sure students are making healthy and safe choices around dressing appropriately for the weather, making wise decisions about, well, I'm going to take the College Street shuttle bus downtown instead of walking downtown. Some of those small things can go a long way. So again, good conversation to be having with your students. Some of the other things that we see pretty consistently right at this juncture in the semester will be some of the patterns that emerge for students. Certainly one of the big ones that we'll hear from families most about are patterns around communication. We've gotten one really poignant question here. The question is, my daughter seems fine, but seems to be calling and texting much less than she was calling and texting at the start of the semester. So the question is, should we let her be, or should we try and get more info from her? I'm going to say that this is a pretty common pattern, certainly for the young men on campus, but for everyone, that now is a time that they're starting to move into their independence. They're starting to move into social circles. They're really focused on academics. They're really starting to enact the independence that you've helped them develop over the years. I would say it certainly is helpful to have some conversation about what the expectations of communication will look like. Is it maybe not calling or texting every day, but scheduling a set time once or twice a week that we know, okay, we're going to keep Sunday afternoon and Thursday morning as family phone call check-in times. Those can be really helpful things for students to kind of say, okay, I don't have to give you blow-by-blow, play-by-play updates on what's going on in my life, but it's helpful to touch base, to hear what's going on at home, and to update you about how things are going here. I will also say, I think the flip side of that same coin are students who are continue to be in fairly high contact, and that may just continue to be the case. I will leave, we're going to get back to later on, a sense of whether or not that's super concerning, that your student may be going through a really hard time, and again, finding you as that primary source of support. Appropriate and helpful, but again, the encouragement will be, how can you also diversify that portfolio? How can you help them find other places of support in addition to phone calls to home? Now is also a time when we can start to see some patterns around academics, meaning we actually have enough data. Students should have enough data points to know how they're doing in the class. And so their patterns are starting to solidify. Are they showing up to class? Are they doing assignments on time? Are they doing well in those courses? And again, it's helpful to encourage them to think about those patterns, and if things are going well, trending in the right direction, to keep up with that. And if things are a little bit rocky, now is the time again to have conversations with faculty advisors to turn the boat around, because there is enough time left in the semester to do that. Certainly another thing that we see will be shifting and or solidifying social groups. Students who at the very first part of the semester in the honeymoon phase, kind of meeting lots of folks, they were friends with everybody on their floor, and now they're starting to identify the few friends that they may be slightly more connected with. Again, that's normal and expected. And again, I will say, don't worry about that. If a student says, boy, I was really friends with this person in week 2, but now like we're not touching base anymore. The question to ask might be, who are the folks that they are touching base with and having a strong friendships? And for folks who are really struggling socially, again, that might be a good opportunity to connect them to some of the research we're going to talk about a little bit later on. And he touched on Thanksgiving break, but for us, Thanksgiving break absolutely is one of those big markers in the semester. It's an opportunity for them to have a little bit of a break, usually some good food and some connection with friends and family whom they've not seen in a while.
And rest.
It certainly is an interesting and can be an interesting transition for first year students to go home for the first time over Thanksgiving break. Now all of a sudden they've gotten accustomed to a certain level of independence, not having to check in about bedtime, not having to check in about socks on the floor, not having to answer to anyone. And coming home will be an interesting time for you to have a conversation as a family unit about how that emerging independence and emerging adulthood shows up.
And how much laundry they should bring home.
And how much laundry they should bring home. It sounds like most students I've talked to are doing really well on laundry. So we'll see. We'll hear from families what the laundry situation looks like when they come home for break. Some of your students are absolutely going to feel the stress, as Annie mentioned. Again, they would have come out from midterms and they will be looking right around the corner to final exams. This is an opportunity, again, to help them balance and manage that stress, hold things in perspective. You can ask them some of the things about what are the things that help them when they're stressed, what are the mindfulness techniques and or things that will help mitigate or manage stress. But it's also a time for you to be able to say to them, and while you're home, you can take a break. A small break of just a breath of fresh air helps recharge the batteries to come back strong for finals. And again, now is the time to start to think about what's happening over winter break and what's happening next semester for them. Without overwhelming them with too much planning, it is a helpful time to start that conversation.
I remember I would, in the liberal arts, I had to write a paper or get ready for group projects. So it's not just final exams, but many of them may have to do work while over break as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
And again, over these next several weeks, they are going to start to turn their attention to course registration, looking for next semester. They're going to be getting back some pretty impactful grades. And again, for some of your students, that will be a pretty informative thing around how are things really going in this semester, in this class. And again, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm going to end the semester with as strong a GPA as possible? If you're not familiar with the academic alert system at UVM, students who are really not doing well, at risk of possibly failing a class, they've missed a lot of classes or their grades put them in jeopardy of failing, academic alerts will go out by faculty members. And so it may be worthwhile to ask your student if they've received any academic alerts, but at least to know that those alerts will go out and their academic dean's office will be following up with students who receive multiple academic alerts. And again, we're starting to think about moving through these final few weeks of the semester. My hope is that many of your students have now started to really come into some habits and patterns of behavior to make themselves academically successful. They're studying consistently, they're doing their assignments, they're now knowing how to manage all the reading that they have to do for class, and that these final few weeks of the semester will go strongly and smoothly. Again, it's a helpful point of conversation for you to have and to be asking them some of those things as we head to Thanksgiving break. The last is, again, we begin the conversation of career development with students here in their first semester at school. We think this is an important thing to know, that it's not just seniors who are ready to enter the labor force or grad school, but first year students as well. Some important things to give you as information will be a career fair that's coming up on the 22nd. Absolutely worthwhile for someone who's a first year student just to show up and to walk around and start to get a feel and sense of what that might look like. We'll talk about career interest groups again in a little bit, but encouraging your student to be part of those is super helpful. And again, really starting to think about using this first year as an opportunity to explore really what it is they're interested in, which often will lead to some students kind of saying, okay, well, I came to UVM thinking that I would be this major to do that job. And now we'll begin the process of them finding out whether or not there are other things that they may be more passionate or interested in. Again, for students, especially for students who are undeclared, or Annie likes to call them, or academic explorers, there's also going to be a major and minor fair at the end of October, October 29th, in the Davis Center. A great opportunity for students to kind of show up, start to talk to some people, get some idea of what this might look like and what it might lead to in the future. And certainly for our incoming first year students, a really helpful resource.
And that learning community, well, no, the interest group around exploration is really helpful for those who don't have a sense of what they want to do yet. And that's really okay. I think many students often change or transition their majors or what their interests are, you know, throughout their first year and even a little bit into their second year.
Correct. Absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks, Joe. I think I'll take over a little bit now and walk through some of the resources that you may be aware of, but we want to highlight on campus because we just think they're really helpful for students and try to offer them as much as we can in really different, in a variety of ways. So if you think about just, you know, the apps that your student can download, or you could download these apps as well. You know, we've got the Compass app for events, like the UVM board page. UVM board is a page that we have. We've actually gotten national recognition for it, that keeps students in the know about what's happening on campus, what's happening in the nearby area, everything from, you know, concerts to comedians to events to cultural activities that are ongoing. Grubhub, you know, less the name, is about food and how to order food online. Some students really love that convenience as they're walking to and from class, that they just stop in and grab something on their way, and Grubhub lets them order ahead of time. Rider is our on-campus shuttle, so they can download that app and know at any point in time where the shuttle is and how much longer it would take for them to be picked up by the shuttle, which is really good to know as the weather gets a little cooler on campus. The transit app that we wanted, that was up here right now, is our actual local and regional bus system that runs in and around the campus and is free to anyone who has a CAT card ID. So that's open and free to students who want to use it. And then I really want to stress the Navigate app. I think many of our first year students have already downloaded that app, but this is the app that we see as the most essential app for students around their academics, with class scheduling, advising, study buddies, tutoring. All of these services are in one app. It can push out notifications to students. They might have financial holds on their registration, and so that would be key. If they do, then they need to get those holds off by the time that registration for courses next semester happen in early November. So this is the app that really, if they don't download anything else, I would suggest they have that one for their academic success. And then if you go beyond that, you know, we're always concerned about the students' mental health. I mean, mostly in, you know, college is stressful. It's hard. It's supposed to be hard. They're juggling a lot of things. They're learning new ways of kind of being in community with others. They're being challenged by their faculty members or maybe peers in the classroom. And so these are just some really good resources on campus that we have beyond the counseling center. You know, the counseling center really is for somebody who needs ongoing therapy, you know, maybe 12 sessions or less. But there's lots of different ways, and Joe mentioned this a little bit, about, you know, taking care of themselves in their mental health, even just through mediation, yoga, meditation, you know, mindfulness. And again, I want to stress Living Well is a great place to explore those kinds of opportunities. We have mental health drop-in series. We have that U at UVM, and certainly if they're in crisis, as I mentioned before, there's both a crisis text line as well as on-call ability for both our counseling center and our student health center. So there's lots of ways to stay healthy, and I certainly prefer, you know, exercise and getting outside even in the winter. And I think for Joe and those who are warm loving friends, you know, getting outside in the winter is really key. As much as it's cold, it's also very bright. It's sunnier in the winter, typically in January, February. And I think it's just a healthier way of being kind of out and getting lots of fresh air and exercising and moving around the campus. So I want to pause here and also turn it over to Joe, because we have many ways that we talk about. We don't want our students just to get by. We want our students to flourish. We want them to really, really enjoy being here and getting the most out of college that they can at UVM. So Joe has put up, and we'll talk about now, kind of a model that we look to in ways of trying to plan out our programs and services. Agreed.
I didn't say this earlier. My main role on campus is that I coordinate the university's care team, which is kind of a group of staff that our job collectively is to identify and support students who may be struggling or going through a hard time. I've now gotten into the habit that when I meet with students who are really kind of not finding their way or struggling a little bit, I'll pull this exact slide up to them and kind of talk through Corey Keyes' model of flourishing. The idea behind it is that the likelihood is we should have a balance of these things in our lives, and in doing these things, we tend the likelihood of flourishing and thriving is increased. And so we'll talk, and I'll ask students. Typically, most students learning something new is a given. But looking at some of the other circles on the screen, we'll kind of walk through and ask them questions about, are they doing things in these areas? And we'll often hear students say, well, you know, in high school, I was volunteering twice a week and I was playing sports and I was doing these things and I was, and here so far, I've just been like focusing only on school, or I haven't been doing any of those things that I used to be doing. And so it's a helpful little model just to kind of say and gently nudge, hey, student, here are some categories of things that if you're not quite sure what to do about, things aren't quite clicking, or you're not quite feeling like you're thriving here, some things that might help. We're going to give some very specific ways that we also encourage students to identify things on campus to do. One of them, Annie mentioned, is the UVM board, calendar, and blog. So we're thinking about interacting physically with others. We're thinking about learning and playing. UVM board absolutely is a resource that will have all of those events kind of laid out day by day. Also, again, if students are not involved in clubs and organizations, the data around engagement in student organizations tell us that students are more successful when they're engaged in those things. And so again, it's the encouragement of, you may not be starting a brand new club right now in the first semester of college, but certainly now would be an opportunity to join clubs. And if the club that you want to join doesn't exist, then next semester or next year would be an opportunity to think about actually starting your own club. Again, we've talked about career interest groups, but again, in thinking about interacting and learning, students are able to, based on their career interest, really engage in very active groups on campus with like-minded, similar interest folks. This is all available on a platform called Handshake through the Career Center. Again, if you go to the Career Center website, you'll be able to get full information about Handshake and joining career interest groups. Meaning making and spiritual activity we also find is something that many of our students will say, actually, yeah, I don't really give that much intentional thought. And so I will always encourage students to think about ways to engage in this area. For some, that could mean actual faith-based activities or clubs or organizations. And for some, it may not involve faith, but it may involve really just delving into how do I make meaning of my experience and existence here at UVM. One of the primary places of referral that I will encourage students to connect with is the UVM Interfaith Center, whether or not their interest is faith-based or not. But to engage in activities that find meaning, we find are helpful. There are many opportunities to help others on campus. One of them is a quick one in trying to address food insecurity on campus. There's a program that students can donate some of their meal swipes that will then be eligible. Folks who aren't on a meal plan or who need additional meal swipes would be able to sign up for. And certainly we have some pretty vibrant clubs and organizations. One is called Volunteers in Action, and a very vibrant alternative spring break program that students really kind of are already in the process now of starting to think about next spring break. Would I want to do an alternative spring break project? The Student Life website has a whole section under their civic engagement section around how to get involved, both here on campus, in the community, and more broadly afield. Many students already are well into engaging in our campus rec. The primary way that students are involved will be intramural sports. There are many really fun intramural sports opportunities: volleyball, basketball, hockey, tennis, soccer, all of those things. And so again, if your student was active in high school and haven't found a way to be active, an encouragement to connect with campus rec would be a helpful thing. It's hard to get through this section also without mentioning, this is not an area of life that I really engage in. I tell folks all the time that I love ski trips. I just don't ski on ski trips. But we have a lot of opportunities here, both mountains and our Lake Champlain, that afford students opportunities to get outside, get involved. And again, as Annie mentioned, when winter can sometimes be a little bit darker and colder and people tend to hermit a little bit, engaging in ski passes, and an ability to engage with friends and be in a bus together and go is a wonderful thing. A quick note is that November 15th is the deadline to be purchasing ski passes. And so if your student still has not purchased a ski pass to a mountain in the area and they would like to do that, they should think about doing that sooner than later. And again, one resource is right near the tunnel of the Davis Center is the Ski and Snowboard Club headquarters, and they will help answer questions for students if they have any.
And I'd like to mention the lake too. The mountains are great, but I spend a lot of time just walking and hiking around the area of the lake and the bike path that's downtown. I find that to be really enjoyable, especially this time of year, and especially is also in the winter time.
Absolutely.
So let's move on, Joe, to the resources for families, and I'll go through the next 3 slides that are our last 3 slides, and then we'll take it to questions from all of you. We wanted to highlight that we also have a UVM Parent and Family Resource website for all of you. So when Joe and I aren't here on a webinar, you can click in, and we actually have set it up so it is month by month and what's going on in the life of your student and what might some of the resources be within that month that is important to them. So you can see it's, well, we passed the parent and family weekend, but certainly important dates, the academic calendar are all good things for, I think, families to know to help their student prepare for what's coming up next.
And this website is, if you search for the Vice Provost Dean of Students office, you'll see a whole section about parent and family resources.
Great, thank you, Joe. And then let's talk a little bit as we wrap up just about communication. We just said it's not going to be Joe or I on a webinar every day, but certainly we will have times that we may need to contact you. And actually that probably is going to be more Joe than me. But there's regular emails, if you don't already get them, that go out to parents and families from me. There's also Res Life monthly newsletters that go out, and I suggest you really try to get those because they talk more about the deadlines for housing and dining, and when to look at signing up for the contracts, when breaks are, those kinds of things. And then certainly if students are making choices around alcohol or drugs that are not good choices for themselves, and find themselves in the conduct process on campus, we will notify you. Our conduct office will email you and let you know that the student has been found responsible. And that's a good red flag for you to know that you probably it's time to have a conversation about your expectations around drug or alcohol use.
I will just insert a shameless plug here. Our ability to email you is also dependent on us having accurate email information and contact information for you. So if you've not asked your student what contact information or emergency contact information exists in their file, it would be a helpful thing for you to do that so that you can make sure that we have ways to contact you when needed.
And Joe, where do they go to update that?
If the student just goes to their portal, their UVM, My UVM portal, there should be opportunities for them to update contact information and emergency contact information, which is how we will get your email and phone number.
Great. And the last two hopefully do not have to happen, but if they do, if students are in danger themselves or someone else, like I said, it probably would be Joe reaching out to you and seeking your support and making sure that we're all on the same page about how best to help the student who might be in true distress. And then the last one, of course, sometimes we find that there are campus emergencies. Luckily, we have had very few in my 22 years here, but something like even a flood is really a flood in the residence hall. That's water coming down through our sprinkler systems or something like that. But if at any point we find that there's more than just a few students who might be disrupted by something that's happened on campus, then we'll reach out. It's typically through, again, an email or maybe some phone calls to those students who are directly impacted. And then the last slide before questions are just when you can contact us. And I just want to say anytime, really. The Vice Provost and Dean of Students office, there's the four of us that are typically in and around. Me, Joe, David Nestor, the Dean of Students, and Jillian Rodriguez are really here for you to talk to if you have questions, especially if there's a student that's in crisis. I know Joe will want to hear that ahead of time, so kind of garner our resources and gather the folks on campus that can reach out to that student and make sure that we can support them the best as possible. And then if you just want to consult with us about something you're knowing about or worried about or concerned about, or you want to provide really good feedback. I have wonderful emails sometimes from folks who really want to offer positive feedbacks about some of the things that we've been doing. But feel free to call or email us. And then also, if there's questions, if you're worried, like Joe said, about, wow, is my student talking to me enough, not enough, then certainly those are the kinds of the questions that we can help you with, and also maybe even on our end, try to encourage students to make sure that they have good, healthy, positive, lifestyle here on campus, but also are keeping in contact with you, and everybody's on the same page about how they're doing. So,
Care form.
Yeah, and that's where Joe has mentioned that he oversees the CARE team, and CARE stands for concerning or risky events on campus. So that can be both a student or an event. We have a form that's widely publicized on campus, and you as parents can also fill it out as well. But it's a nice form where anybody can say, hey, I'm really worried about Joey or Susie or Bobby, and write up what their concerns are about the student, and then that goes to the CARE team, and the CARE team figures out how best to reach out to the student and provide them with the support that they need. So it's a wonderful tool. You can be anonymous, but we want folks to tell us who is reporting about a certain student on our campus. But it's been a great way for us to proactively reach out to students and make sure that we can support them. So I think that's it for Joe and myself. We're really happy you tuned in today, but we also want to take a few minutes. We've got a few minutes more here and a little bit of time that if there are some of you out there that have questions and that you want to kind of ask now, this is a great time for Joe and I being together. We can tag team some of these questions. So if there's
and we know that most questions have been answered in the chat feature as we've been going through. But if there are any questions that might be worthwhile for the good of everyone to hear, again, now is an opportunity to ask those, and we will spend some time answering them over the webinar.
There's one question about a flu shot, and I'm getting the answer from John Paul.
Okay, so we've got one question coming in about flu shot, but we can
to sign up for a flu shot, or do they just walk in?
I think they can just walk in to the flu shot.
I think so too.
Yeah.
My understanding of it is there may be special events where we offer clinics, that those are advertised, but outside of those advertised clinic hours, any student who walks into the student health center can get a flu shot.
Between 9 and 11.
Between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. to the student health center right here on Pearl.
Yep. And just so folks know, faculty and staff also are encouraged to get flu shots around this time of year as well. So it's not just students who are getting them. Faculty and staff also we encourage to get immunized, just because we know that the flu season hits, every year. And we're not sure when it will hit, but every year we get it, and it can be a hard couple of weeks on campus because it takes a lot of people out of their regular routine, and we just want to be as precautious as possible. So, yeah. Kate, are there any other questions that might be good for the general audience?
I may have missed this. Who does our student contact, and how do they pay if our student is coming back a day early?
Oh, if students want to come back a day early, and I'm making an assumption in this question that it's about living in the residence halls, then they would want to contact Residential Life. Email is typically better for Residential Life, and they can work with the student about if they can come back early. Usually it's for academic reasons. That would be the reason. Well, or they pay a little extra.
I believe that Res Life now has if it's on campus housing, they really do have a fairly robust, what they would consider break housing provision. What I don't know off the top of my head is whether or not that would require paying for a portion of the break, not just one day. But if you look on the Residential Life website or contact Residential Life directly, they would be able to get an answer to that. And depending on if it's Thanksgiving break or winter break, those may also be slightly different answers.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Joe. And we're still looking at general questions that are coming in. Anything else, Kate, that might be on the minds of our families and parents out there?
Nothing at the moment, but we can give it a second.
Yep. And then I this time is often good to also say that so far, I feel like from my perspective, and Joe, I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like the semester has started off to a really good, positive place. As I mentioned earlier, we've sent out it's almost like a check-in for students at their first 6 weeks. About 25% of our first-year students have answered it and responded to it. And generally, of all the questions we asked about how's it going, how's your residential experience, how's advising, I mean, there's some really positive signs that we're seeing. This cohort of students, I think, are really jumping in and getting engaged and doing pretty well. It doesn't mean that they're successful all the time, but they're doing pretty well on average. Okay. So it's been great having you. I think that we'll call that a wrap for now, and tune in again. We try to host these webinars maybe once a semester or so, just to check in about what's happening on campus. And by all means, contact us if you ever have any questions. Sure. So again, this is Annie Stevens, Vice Provost for Student Affairs. Thank you very much for joining us.
I'll also say thanks everyone. This is Joe Russell, the Assistant Dean of Students. Happy fall to everybody, and be in touch as needed.
Thank you.